The prospect of another Trump presidency in the US has driven down some European stocks. Joining us with more on this about how Europe is already feeling the effects of the US election next week on Tuesday is DW correspondent Chiponda Chimbelu. Chimbelu joins us from Berlin now. So how is the US election affecting business in Europe, Chiponda?
Well, it is the prospect of the EU facing a trade war with the United States if Republican nominee Donald Trump were to become president. Now, that is what is driving down some European stocks, even though we don't know who will be the next U.S. president, of course, that will happen next week. Now, polls continue to show that the race is too close to call, so it could very well be that Democratic nominee Vice President Kamala Harris wins. Still, the shares of companies in European sectors that export heavily to the U.S. have been punished at the markets, and that's mostly the auto industry and makers of luxury goods. Now, one list indicates that the share prices of more than 24 stocks in those sectors have declined more than 7% since the end of last month. Now, that includes companies like German car maker Volkswagen and the luxury goods conglomerate France's LVMH. Now, investors are worried that Trump would impose tariffs. He has said that he would introduce tariffs of 20% on European goods.
And how exactly do you see relations between Europe and the US changing in that scenario?
Well, a Harris presidency wouldn't change relations between Washington and Brussels, but a Trump presidency would, of course. Now, when Donald Trump was president, he preferred bilateral talks with individual EU member states. Now, that strategy could help him divide the EU and make it easier for his administration to get what it wants. Some EU leaders are thought of as potential interlocutors for the bloc, though, and the most likely to get Trump's ear are Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, Italian PM Giorgia Meloni, and the Polish President Andrzej Duda. And that's because all these leaders have positioned themselves as like-minded Trump allies in Europe. The only problem is that they do not all have the same agenda. Hungary's Orban would be emboldened by a Trump victory ideologically, but he wouldn't use his Republican connections to speak on behalf of European interests. And meanwhile, Italy's Meloni and Poland's Duda will have differences with Trump when it comes to Ukraine. So the EU may very well need a different tact.
Thank you, Chiponda, for those updates.